Welcome to my channel, Catskill Mountain Homebody. My name's Amy. Alright, on this channel, I make all kinds of videos. I make recipe videos, decorating videos, but I also make videos about life in the New York Catskill area, because that's where we have lived for the last 18 years. I've made videos on the 10 reasons I love living here. I've made videos on things that surprise me living here. Videos on moving to the New York Catskills. I've made many shorts about life in the Catskills and the weather and the scenery. Today I'm going to make another video on life in the Catskill Mountains. And this video I'm going to call New York Catskills Culture Shock. I am going to go over some of the things that were surprising, that gave us some culture shock that we weren't used to when we first moved here 18 years ago. And the reason I'm making this video is there are more and more people moving to the New York Catskills. You may be familiar with the area, but if you've never lived here, there are certain things that might surprise you that you should be aware of. So we're going to go over that in this video. All right, the first thing that caused us, this is about us, this is our culture shock. But again, it might affect people who move up here might experience similar things. All right, the first thing I'm going to mention in this video is random rifle fire or gunfire. All right, if you're new to my channel, my husband and I have been together for 30 years. We've been married 25. And we have lived in many parts of the country. So we have lived, and even separately, we have lived in New York State. I lived in Rhode Island. We've lived in Arizona. We've lived in the California desert. We have moved around a lot in our 30 years of our adulthood. So, we both were familiar with the New York Catskills. We used to come up here for vacations when we were young, both of us. Even though I'm from Jersey, my husband's from Long Island, we both came up here for vacations. So it's not that we weren't familiar with the Catskills. However, once you live up here full time, there are things that you might not be used to. So, random rifle fire. And this kind of comes with a stupid story. A funny story that involves us. So we moved here in the fall of 2006. And we weren't in this house. We were in the first house we bought over in the watershed. So, and I discussed what the watershed is in an earlier video on the Catskills. Okay, so one Saturday afternoon, my husband, my son, and I were in our new house. We hadn't even brought most of our furniture in yet. That's how new we were to the area. This was in the fall of 2006. And my husband was working outside doing different things. My son was playing outside. I don't know what he was playing with. And I was inside the house, probably working on schoolwork or something because I teach. So we had the windows open because it was fall, but it was still warm out. And in the woods, we had a lot of woods behind our house. We owned over 4 acres. So in the woods behind our house, we hear somebody with a chainsaw, like cutting lumber. It was loud, and we weren't used to that because we came from the California desert where you had a tiny yard. Your house had a tiny yard, and nobody was using a chainsaw. There were no trees to cut down in the desert. Okay, so we're not used to hearing a chainsaw in our backyard. But it's the woods and it's the country, so I'm like, okay, maybe somebody's cutting firewood. So I see my husband start to walk into the woods, and Julius comes in, and he says, Dad, he's going to go find out who's using a chainsaw in the woods. I guess Joe told him to come in. So we're like, okay, and we hear the chainsaw, and the chainsaw stops, and then we start to hear the loudest rifle fire you have ever heard in your life. It was like shaking the house. It was so loud. And we immediately, Julius and I, and my son was 6 years old, we panicked. We thought that Joe had gone into the woods and confronted somebody who was cutting a tree down in our woods, and the person murdered Joe. And we just heard gunfire after gunfire, just like it sounded like a really loud rifle fire. So Julius immediately starts crying and is looking for a stick or something to go. He's going to go in the woods and defend his dad at 6 years old. And I yell at him to get in the house. So he's screaming and crying. The gunfire, which we're not used to hearing, is rattling the windows. It's so loud. I've never heard gunfire that loud in my life. So Julius and I have now decided that Joe is murdered. He's been murdered in the woods. So I pick up the phone and I call 911. And I'm on the phone with 911, and the guy on the 911 call can hear the gunshot fire also because it's so loud. And I'm telling him there was a chainsaw noise. My husband went into the woods to investigate. Next thing I know, there's all this gunfire. So my son is screaming in the background, crying, saying, "Dad!" He thinks his dad's been murdered. So I'm on the phone with 911 for like a few minutes, and I look out in the backyard, and Joe's walking out of the woods, just casually walking out of the woods. So now I gotta tell the 911 guy, "Oh, it's not an emergency. Never mind. My husband came out of the woods." And the 911 guy's like, "No, I want to talk to your husband." So my husband's coming up, and I'm on the phone, and he's coming up to the back porch, and he's like, Who are you talking to on the phone?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I called 911. And Julius is still crying. And he's like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "Why did you call 911? And I'm like, "I thought you were murdered." So what happened was, Joe had gone in the back of our house in the woods to see who was using a chainsaw. It was a neighbor. They were using the chainsaw in their property, not on our property, cutting, because people use wood-burning stoves up here. And this guy, in the middle of cutting down trees, put down his chainsaw, picked up his hunting rifle, because it's hunting season, and he was doing target practice. So Joe is watching this from afar, watching the guy do target practice. I was like, okay, that's interesting. And in the meantime, I'm at the house thinking that he's been murdered. Oh, Scouts wants to come up on me. Say hi. Say hi. Oh, you're so cute. That's my beagle. This is Scouty. Say hi, Scout. That's Scout. Yeah, you're a good boy. So Joe has to tell the 911 person that he's not dead and that his wife is overreacting because she's new to the mountains and the woods. So you have to get used. That was a big culture shock for me because I'm not used to gunfire in my backyard, or even someone, of course Chipper's playing with his bone now, or I'm not even used to somebody using a chainsaw on my property or near my property. So that was a definite culture shock, so much so that I called 911 because I thought Joe was murdered. And Joe had to tell the 911 dispatch that, no, my wife's just stupid. My wife's crazy. So that was our first month here. That was the culture shock of the first month living in the Catskill Mountains. I hear gunfire all the time now. In hunting season, people are firing their weapons, doing target practice all the time. So hearing gunfire is a common thing, and you have to get used to it in the New York Catskill Mountains. So that was the first culture shock that caused me to call 911 and caused Julius to hysterically cry at 6 years old, thinking his father was murdered by a madman in the woods. All right, the second culture shock that we had has to do with the wildlife in the Catskill Mountains, which we're not used to. We were not used to living in New Jersey. Again, I'm from Jersey. My husband's from Long Island. I've never seen as much wildlife in Rhode Island, in Arizona, and in California. So the coyotes are one thing that's very weird, especially at this house. We have a lot of coyotes. They'll come in the backyard. 1 o'clock in the morning, you'll hear them moaning in the backyard pretty close to the house. And it is unnerving if you're not used to it because it sounds like people. It'll happen, in the middle of the night. And it is weird because when you're not used to it. When we first moved to the Catskills, we had a back porch with stairs coming up to it and a sliding glass door. And one night I was in bed. My husband was in bed. We were sleeping. And I heard the screen part of the sliding glass door. I heard something move it and hit it. because our bedroom was on the same side of the house as the sliding glass door, which went into our dining room. So I look out the window. I don't see anything. I run to the back door. It was locked. The glass part was locked. And our screen door is off the... Our sliding screen door is off the track, and it's kind of leaning on the side, like something had hit it. So I run back to the bedroom, and I tell Joe, something just knocked our screen door off the back porch, off the back track. I go back to the bedroom, I look out the window, and there's a gigantic bear walking back into the woods across our yard. So I'm yelling at Joe, there's a bear just came up on our back deck. They tried to get in the house, knocked the screen off the track, and then now they're leaving. So I saw the bear. I literally saw the bear walking into the woods. So then we go outside. We look at the screen door, and there is like a dirt mark on it, like from a bear paw. I have never had a bear come up to my back porch before, ever. So that was something very new. And again, that was like the first year we moved there. So what we think happened was we think that the former owners used to keep bags of garbage on the back porch, and that the bear was used to coming up on the back porch and taking the garbage bags. Because we found some garbage bags in the woods that had been rifled through, and so they weren't our garbage bags. So we thought that's probably what the bear was looking for. The next thing I know, Joe pulls the stairs off the back porch and makes a railing. So Joe ripped the stairs out. They were rotting anyway, and I think there was termite damage on the stairs, so he ripped them out. He built a railing, and we never had bears on the porch again. We also made sure not to put food on the porch to attract any bears, but we lived there for 16 years, and we never had another bear come on the porch. So, lesson learned. Again, we didn't know. Thank God we had the glass door locked that night and closed, and that I never slept with the screen door open. I would never sleep with the screen door open in that house because I was always afraid of a bear coming in. So the wildlife, getting used to the wildlife in the Catskill Mountain was a culture shock because we weren't used to that type of wildlife, bears and coyotes in other parts that we lived in. Okay, the third thing that was culture shock for us moving to the New York State Catskill Mountains was no trick-or-treating. No house-to-house trick-or-treating. This is the first place of all the places I've lived in my life where there is no trick-or-treating on Halloween. Which I don't like, personally. I'm sure some people like that. I don't like that. The first year we lived here, first of all, I'll show you pictures of our home. We lived at the top of a huge hill. I mean, if you were to trick or treat in our neighborhood, just to get to our house, you would have to trek up a huge mountain. So the first year that we moved here, I got candy because I had never lived in an area where nobody came to trick or treat. So I got candy, and I'm waiting Halloween night, and no one comes. Not one person. And we don't go trick-or-treating because there's no neighborhood where there's houses close enough together to trick-or-treat. So what I learned very quickly after that first year is that in most of the neighborhoods in the Catskills, there is no trick-or-treating because the houses are too far apart. You would need a car to drive you from house to house. And so people just don't buy candy, and nobody expects anyone to come. Now, we moved to this house in 2020, and same thing. Even though I can see some of my neighbors, this is not a good road to trick-or-treat on. The houses are too far apart, and nobody trick-or-treats here. So even the first year I moved here, I had hope and I got candy, because I was like, maybe they come here. No, not one person has ever come here for trick-or-treating. So, of course, my dog is eating his bone again. That was a big shock for us, because again, I've never lived in a place where there is no trick-or-treating. What they do instead is the elementary schools here hold what's known as trunk or treat, which I know a lot of communities are doing now, but I had never heard of it before I moved here in 2006. Trunk or treat is where they usually have it in like the parking lot of the local school. Sometimes they have the parking lot of like of a fairground or something. And people dress up and they open up the trunks of their cars and they decorate the trunks of their cars in different themes, and they give out at their cars, kids trick or treat, they give out candy. And usually the fire department's there with fire engines, and community groups come and they give out candy, and or they do different activities with the kids. And that's the trick or treat event that you do. It always happens before Halloween. So you don't do it on Halloween. It's always the week before Halloween. It's usually on a weekend. And that's what my son's school did. And again, all the schools up here do that. So we don't have trick or treat. We have trunk or treat in the New York Catskills. So you got to get used to that. Okay. Here's the thing that's a little bit sad about trunk or treat. It's really geared to the elementary school children, not the middle school, or, I mean, middle school could do it too, but it's not for the high school kids. It's really for little kids. So if you're a high school student and you like to go trick-or-treating, there's no area to trick-or-treat here. You'd have to drive to a neighborhood where there is trick-or-treating. I will say there are a few areas or neighborhoods in the Catskills where the houses are close together and people can trick-or-treat, but most neighborhoods it's not happening. So I have not given out candy to kids coming trick-or-treating at my house for 18 Halloweens. That's how long it's been since I've had anyone trick-or-treating in my neighborhood. All right, the last thing I'm going to mention in this video in terms of like culture shock has to do with jobs, the job market. When we moved here in 2006, we moved here for my job. I'm a teacher. I found a job here. That's why we moved here. I've mentioned this in my other videos. I didn't move here because I wanted to live in the Catskills. I moved here because I got a teaching job, and we wanted to move from California closer to New Jersey, where my family's from, and Joe's family in Long Island. And this was the closest we came to. So I ended up getting a teaching job, which I've been doing for 18 years and I love. And that's what brought us to the New York Catskills. So we did come here with a job, right? I didn't move here with no job. But my husband is another story. My husband worked in IT, and he worked with computers. And we assumed that anywhere around New York State, especially because we're not that far from New York City, we thought there would be 1 million jobs here for my husband to just get in IT. And we just assumed in like 3 months he'd find a job. I already had a job. We're like, oh yeah, he'll find a job in a minute. And when we got here, we realized that wasn't the case. There are very few jobs in IT in the Catskill Mountains. And he had a really hard time. It took him 2 years to find an IT job. And he ended up finding an IT job for the county that we live in. But it took him 2 years to do that. In the meantime, he had to do all kinds of different jobs. I mean, he worked for Home Depot. He worked in construction. He just did a lot of low wage jobs looking for an IT job. So we made the assumption as outsiders that he was just going to walk into the Catskills and find an IT job next week. And it really, really was difficult. He did eventually find one, but you can't just come to the Catskills and think you're going to, like, the week after you get here, find a job that you want. It's not that easy. Now, I assume that in 2025, it's different than 2006 because there's remote work now. So a lot of companies are hiring remote workers. So I think it would be much easier to find an IT job online today than it was for my husband back in 2006. So that's my opinion. I have a son. He graduated from college. He works 100% remote for a company that used to have an office in Boston but shut it down during the pandemic, and they are a 100% remote company, and he works in software sales. So, I mean, you could never do that kind of job here in 2006. Like, there would be no software sales position job, nationwide position job out of your house back in 2006 that you could do online. So that issue, I don't know how relevant that issue is today, but that was culture shock for us, that he had a hard time finding a full-time job. That was very difficult for us because my teaching salary wasn't great. I actually took a pay cut coming here from California, a big pay cut. And so, but we thought it wasn't a big deal. Like, yeah, I'll take a big pay cut, But Joe will find a job. He'll find an IT job because we're in New York, and it'll be fine. And the first 2 years here were very difficult financially. So that was a culture shock. And again, just because we didn't know. All right, so those are some of the things that were culture shock for us when we moved to the New York Catskill Mountain area. Hope that video helps you if you're planning to move here. Or if you're moving to a rural area, it's probably similar to what we experienced here. Thank you for joining me. Please consider subscribing to my channel, Catskill Mountain Homebody, and like this video. And I'll see you in the next video. I'll be making more videos on the Catskill Mountains. See you next time. Bye.